Good evening and hello to everyone. We hope you're having we hope you had a good weekend, and today we're going to have our fourth lesson in the wisdom of Kabbalah. And what we're going to do today is the perception of reality. Now this is a very fundamental, one of the fundamental topics that we need to take a look at. Actually, all the lessons that we're doing in this fundamental course is like building blocks of the structure that we're going to build our study on. So all these topics are very important, and perception of reality is especially important simply because we need to, in order to discover everything in reality, we need to start looking at reality from a different perspective. And this differentiation in perspective is really a tilting point in how we can begin to change our perception, how we can begin to change the way we feel life and how life affects us. So all of that is very, very important today. So we're going to look at how the wisdom of Kabbalah looks at the perception of reality. We're also going to take a look at how science looks at reality and what the differences from our perspective is. Now, the wisdom of Kabbalah, as you know from last lesson, is pretty much nearly 6,000 years old, and so it's a science that's been developed in order to attain a higher level of consciousness that we in our five senses at this moment cannot perceive. Therefore, what spirituality is from the perspective of Kabbalah is to actually build this sixth sense, also known as a soul, so that we can perceive the force that is really behind the whole of reality, and we can actually discover the cause and consequences of everything and be an active participant in reality rather than just living the consequences of reality. Because our world is pretty much a consequence of everything that's really predetermined, simply because think about the life cycles in life, the seasons, the days, the hours, everything. It's all in cycles, and all these cycles keep repeating themselves. So there's a software that's actually running, and within that software, everything that happens, we simply get influenced and affected. And according to that influence and effect, we go through certain sensations, certain development phases. And these development phases, sooner or later, inside of us, develop something called the dot in the heart. As you know, or you may have known, or if you watched the previous lessons, you would have known that a person who studies the wisdom of Kabbalah has really 2 points inside him or herself, and one of those is our regular corporeal body. Okay, so let's take a look at that, and let's make him a happy chappy. All right, so this is normally a regular human being. You'll have to excuse my drawing, I'm not an artist.
Nice looking guy.
Right, there we go. Okay, so this is our body, and in our body, that's how we live, that's how we feel life and we feel reality. However, the Kabbalists say that if a person is looking for the meaning of life, why am I living? Okay, the meaning of life. Why am I living? And wants to discover really the purpose of life, or should I say the purpose of life. That person is seeking something not within his corporeal being, but something with a deeper feeling. And that feeling, that drive to discover the purpose of life, comes from a thing called the dot in the heart. Now this is a sensation that we all have when we want to discover what's the purpose of our lives. Why are we living? I mean, what's it all for? The only thing that we're going through is more and more dramas. Life doesn't bring so much fulfillment. Some of us believe in religions, think something's going to happen when we die. Do we really know about it? No, we don't. We have no idea if anything is going to happen or not when we die. I mean, if you look at a chicken and you cut it up and you eat it, and then the bones just, disintegrate. So what's really the difference between a man's body and a chicken's body or any other animal's body? We just rot away. As humans, we like to think, or we have been taught to think, that there is something that's going to happen, or something may happen, after we end up dead. Well, today we're going to discover what the wisdom of Kabbalah says about many of the things that we've been taught in life through religions, philosophies, I don't know, mystical teachings and beliefs and so on. However, the main thing that we need to understand here is that any student who studies the wisdom of Kabbalah needs to differentiate between the body and the dot in the heart, because this is very important. Regular people don't really search for the meaning of life. They don't really, go out to discover in full strength and full desire the meaning of their lives. Sometimes they ask about it, while we're living, but the next day or the week after, that desire just fades away. So we're talking about a very, very specific person who has an inner drive to understand why he's living, or she is living for that matter, and what the meaning of life is. Should a person come to the wisdom of Kabbalah, he or she will come with this dot in the heart. So two discernments must be inside of us. One is our corporeal life, corporeal existence, let's call it, which is our body. And the second is seeking meaning of life. Now, our corporeal body, as you know from the previous lessons, is just seeking pleasure. It wants to get fulfilled. It has desires and it wants to fulfill them. And that's great. There's nothing wrong with that at all. So if you have desires, you can go out and fulfill them. Not a big deal, no problem. From the perspective of Kabbalah, it's not a problem at all. However, if your dot in the heart awakens and you begin to understand that there's nothing really to get pleasure from in life, because even if you get the things you want, you don't really feel that fulfilled or satisfied, then this dot in the heart is beginning to bug you. It begins to pinch you. It begins to kind of not let you rest. This Kozman all the time is bugging you and telling you, hey, why are you living? What are you doing? What's the meaning of life anyway? You're doing the same thing every day. So in between these two sensations of corporeality and seeking spirituality, a person who comes to Kabbalah must study and understand how to perceive, or how to at least start approaching reality from a different perspective that he or she has been used to in life. And that's what we're going to take a look at today. Now, if you have any questions, and I'm sure you might have, please feel free to send them through and we'll try to answer them as best we can. Should you have any questions, if you are watching this from a recording or from the YouTube channel and you're not live with us, but you do have questions, you can always send your questions in through the Education Center website, or from our Facebook page, or even from the YouTube chat box you can. And the friends will there give you the email address also if you'd like to send us an email with questions, and we'd be more than happy to answer them. So let's take a look at the perception of reality. And see what Kabbalists say. Now, when we study the wisdom of Kabbalah, we definitely want to stick to the sources of Kabbalah. So we're going to read a little bit text from the authentic sources from our sages, which we discussed last week. And then we're going to take a look at what that means, what they're talking about. And then we're going to take a look at how the world is looking at perceiving reality, and how Kabbalists look at it, and how we can make that switch from looking at life regularly, just like we've always been doing with our corporeal senses, and start looking at it, even though we're still in corporeality, we still have 5 senses, and we don't yet have a soul, which you might be a little shocked to hear, but we don't have a soul at the moment. We're going to build one though, so that's exciting. So what we're going to do is see how the regular society is looking at the perception of reality through the eyes of science, and how Kabbalists are looking at it. So I'm going to read a little bit, and then we'll see how we go. So the first thing I'm going to read from is from a book called Kabbalah for the Student. I think we've got it here, but I'll show you that later as well. So there's a book, it's a big green book called the Kabbalah for the Student. And you can also find it in our on our website as well, if you're interested. And on page 424, preface to the book of Zohar, on item 34, This is what it says. Take our senses of sight, for example. We see a wide world before us, wondrously filled. But in fact, we see all that only in our own interior. In other words, there's a sort of photographic machine in our hindbrain which portrays everything that appears to us and nothing outside of us. For that, he has made for us there in our brain a kind of polished mirror that inverts everything seen there, so we will see it outside our brain in front of our face. Yet, what we see outside us is not a real thing. Right, so that's already a phenomenon on its own, because the book of Zohar was written more than 2,000 years ago. So if you think about it, more than 2,000 years ago, these Kabbalists, in fact from the times of Adam, these Kabbalists were talking about seeing reality actually from within us, and that on the outside there's nothing real. That everything that we're living, this whole world called a movie, if you like, which we're actors in, is nothing except what I am going through within my sensations. So to already understand that, to write about that thousands of years ago, is already a big deal, because science has still yet to come to that level of understanding. And imagine why the wisdom of Kabbalah was such a hidden wisdom for thousands of years. How could you have explained this phenomena to people thousands of years ago? You simply couldn't. Only people who were really interested in something like this would have wanted to study it. So the general humanity never had actually the question about the meaning of life. They either had religion, they had beliefs, but they never really had this urge to discover if there was something beyond what we were just led to believe. So to be a Kabbalist, you had to have a strong dot in the heart that led you to a quest. And that quest is to discover the meaning of life. So when Kabbalists attained such levels, they wrote about it, and obviously they couldn't share this with the normal people. Because who's going to believe that everything you live in this world, you're only living it inside your head? A man would never believe it. Well, fortunately, science has come a little bit closer to the wisdom of Kabbalah since the past 100 years. And now we can actually talk about it openly and everybody can discuss it, because people begin to understand that what we're living in is actually something that's going on in our brain and not what's going on seemingly on the outside. However, Baal HaSulam writes here quite nicely as well that the whole idea of seeing everything, although it's all in my mind, but I see everything as if it's on the outside, right in front of my face, is a great design by nature, so that a person could really depict the details of his character, of his traits, or her traits for that matter. So this is actually a trick of nature, where we see everything on the outside, but what we see is actually telling us what we are as a person. Everything we see on the outside is telling us what our nature is, and we are also given the opportunity to compare it to general nature, which is known as the animate, vegetative, and also the still nature, which function in harmony. So we're able to actually format ourselves in such a way when we're studying the wisdom of Kabbalah that we can flip everything in order to discover what's really going on inside us. This is why this wisdom is a very, very amazing wisdom, simply because no other wisdom has such an attitude, and no other wisdom for thousands of years has been telling people or explaining in their books that the whole of reality Everything that we're going through, what we see, hear, smell, taste, is all inside ourselves. And that on the outside, well, what's on the outside is just a question mark. So let's see what else Baal Islam is talking about. He has here another little sentence from an article called Shamati, and it's on page 21, and it's an article called The Matter of Spiritual Attainment. It says, we do not speak of the Creator's essence at all. This is because the root and the place of the creatures begin in the thought of creation, where they are incorporated. So there's one other thing that he's talking about here. Unlike religions who discuss God, Creator, this one force, Kabbalists say, well, there's really nothing to discuss about this God unless I'm feeling Him. And if I don't feel Him, if I'm not actually in reality existing with Him, understanding Him, and pretty much being in the same reality, just like me and Anthony are sitting next to each other. So imagine you and this Creator, or God, or Allah, Elohim, it doesn't matter what you say, or how you name Him, there's just one force, that we're actually sitting next to each other, and we're in this dialogue, we're in this connection. So unless such a connection, something solid, something fully grasped occurs, we really don't have anything to talk about. So the Kabbalists say, well, we can't really talk about the Creator, or God, or Allah, or Elohim, simply because we don't feel Him, we just don't know. But what we can do, they're saying, is if we look to the outside, we can begin to decipher what our nature is. And that's already critical, because we in our lives don't even know what we really are. We just live life. We have a bunch of desires, we run after them. By running after them, we get old and tired most of the time, and mostly we don't really attain the things we wanted to attain. And then we just die. So within that process, within that time period, well, what did we really understand about our lives? What did we really understand about our essence? What did we understand about our nature? What did we understand about the reason for our misery, or the reason for our joys and happiness? Do we really understand what's going on in life, or what's going on with ourselves? So we don't know. And so he writes nicely as well, we don't know the Creator at the moment, but Kabbalists are saying the whole of reality is inside of me, and that is already a good thing to know, because now I can at least begin to discover who I am. And that's equally critical, because if I'm going to make any discovery about the Creator Himself, I need to first of all understand what my capacity is, how my nature works, and how I can use that nature in order to discover something, beyond my five senses. So all of this is already a big leap for anyone who's studying Kabbalah and who wants to find that force behind creation. All right, so let's carry on with a few more things to do. Okay, now as you know from the previous lessons, let's first recap. Okay, as you know, we are a desire to receive pleasure. Okay, in fact, let's make it a little thicker. Okay, we are a desire to receive. That's what we are. This is why we have desires all the time. Every day you have desires. You want to do something. You want to eat. You want to go out. You need to drink. I don't know, food, family, sex, money, honor, fame, knowledge. We're just a desire machine, and that's fine. No problem. Desire to receive pleasure. Now this is us. And as you know from the previous lesson, whenever I get what I want, whenever I am fulfilled, and let's call this fulfillment. Whenever I'm fulfilled, the pleasure, or we can call it pleasure as well, the pleasure and the desire, they cancel each other out. So we're once again left with zero. Okay, so for example, I went out to have lunch today. I really wanted a burger, but by the time, I was half finished by the burger, I was already not getting any taste from it. Why? Because my hunger began to be diluted by my lunch. So that feeling of hunger was decreasing. I was becoming fulfilled. So the pleasure behind it was just, beginning to vanish, beginning to vaporize slowly, until I really just ate it because I needed to finish the burger and just be done with it. Okay, so every desire and the pleasure works in this formula, the same thing. So once you discover that, and this is how our essence works, well, you begin to answer this, you begin to search for the question, well, why? Because I'm not really going to get anything out of this. If I keep living like this, I can't get anything out of this. It's just like nothing. Okay? So, this should bring us now to the approach about understanding our nature and our existence, and from our perspective, how we can perceive reality in such a way that we begin to find pleasure in something that is not vanishing. Because remember, from the previous lessons, the purpose of creation, the reason that we were all created, was because we're a desire to receive, because we wanted fulfillment, and the Creator, or this nature, call it nature, it doesn't matter, nature wants to fulfill us. It's not a coincidence that we're a desire to receive. So by default, we're a desire to receive because actually life wants to fulfill us. However, because we're not functioning correctly, the pleasure and the fulfillment and the desire, they cancel each other out. So we have to find another way of using our nature. This is why I always say desire to receive is not a problem. Having a desire is not a bad thing. This is our nature. We can't get rid of this. Okay? And we shouldn't have to either. And we don't have to. Because the purpose of life is fulfillment. Question is, from what? From what should I get fulfillment that it won't vanish, or it won't disappear, or I won't get saturated? So that is the question. From what am I going to get pleasure? So let's take a look at the perception of reality a bit more. And we're going to now read about, having done a little recap on this, let's read something about the law of equivalence of form. All right? Because this law is very important. The law of equivalence of form. Okay? There we go. Sorry. There we go. Okay? Equivalence of form. All right. So once again, let's read something from Baal Salam. So he gives us a bit of a direction. I'm going to read again from the same book, Kabbalah for the Student, page 570, Preface to the Wisdom of Kabbalah, item 13. As corporeal objects are separated from one another by remoteness of location, spirituals are separated from each other by the disparity of form between them. This can be found in our world too. For example, when two people share similar views, they like each other, and the remoteness of location does not cause them to draw far from one another. Conversely, when their views are far, they're hateful of each other, and proximity of location will not bring them any closer. Thus, the disparity of form in their views removes them from each other, and the proximity of form in their views brings them closer to each other. If, for example, one's nature is the complete opposite of another's, they are as far from one another as the east from the west. Similarly, all matters of nearness and remoteness, coupling and unity that unfold in spirituality are but measures of disparity of form. They depart from one another according to their measure of disparity of form, and become attached to one another according to their measure of equivalence of form. Now, what is he trying to say here? This is very important in understanding perception of reality, because what's the purpose of our life? The purpose of our life is to have a connection, as a desire to receive, with this force that created us. What's our problem? Well, call this the creator. Call this me or you. Okay? And what we have here is distance. We do not feel the creator. We just feel ourselves here. So the Kabbalists are explaining to us in a very kind of straightforward way, saying, listen, the only way you can feel the creator and really feel that fulfillment that's that's never ending, okay, can only happen if you and the creator have something to talk about. And that something to talk about, as the example that he's given us here, is like two friends who have something in common. So our minimal common factor, okay, with the creator, okay, when we have this, when we have this minimal contact with the creator, which is equivalence of form, we can say we feel the creator this much. Let's call this the creator, and let's call this me. Okay? So if the creator and the created being have something minimal in common, they have an opportunity to feel each other and to have that kind of a connection with each other up to that measure called equivalence of form. That in this aspect, in this, how does he say it? In this form or desire, let's say, equivalence of form to the measure of my desire, to the measure of a certain desire. Oops, there we go. And that equivalence there, which allows us to feel the creator to that minimal measure, is called the soul. If I don't have a sensory organ that feels the creator, that understands him, that have a direct connection with him in a certain way where we understand each other, then we don't really have a soul. Because a soul is a sensory organ that feels the creator, that feels the force that's fulfilling the whole of reality. And if I don't feel that, it means I don't have a soul. So contrary to what religions tell us, because all the religions say you have a soul and it's going to be great once you're dead. Well, I don't think anybody's been there and back to really describe the situation. So, what we can do is trust our senses and our new approach to discover if what the Kabbalists are saying is true or not. Because what's the point of this world if I can't discover the creator here? It's just redundant. So man should know everything. When I say man, I'm talking about, a person who reaches a higher level of consciousness. So this is not a matter of a woman or a man. We're talking about a human being who reaches a certain level of consciousness while living in this world, so that he or she can perceive the whole of reality, including the force that created the whole of reality, in one space. Okay? And that space is in our desire to receive. We will always be feeling everything here in this, which we're about to find out soon. Let's read a little bit more. Once again, preface to the Wisdom of Kabbalah, item 13. You should understand that although the will to receive is mandatory, law in the creature. So this has to happen. All right, this must exist. This is us. We're a desire to receive, and we don't have to get rid of it. We don't have to be ashamed of it. This is how we're created. All right, so this is a mandatory law in the creature, as it is the essence of the creature and the proper vessel of reception of the goal of the thought of creation. So we have to be a desire to receive if we're going to reach the purpose of life. All right, so the thought of creation, it nonetheless completely separates it from the emanator. Now, despite the fact, okay, this is our dilemma. We just said the equivalence of form means that we need to equalize ourselves with the Creator somehow in order to feel it. Just like me and Anthony here, we've got 5 senses. Here's Anthony. I can touch him, I can talk to him, I can hear him. Shmuel, can you show Anthony as well?
Hey,
yes?
Hey.
Okay, good. There he is. Okay, so there you go. As with my 5 senses, here's Anthony. I can see him, I can touch him, smell him. All right, so he's in my 5 senses. And as much as I can feel him in my 5 senses, and he can feel me in his 5 senses, we've got common space. And that's called this common reality. So for Andrew and for me, this is a black case for my glasses. And nobody can argue with that unless you're colorblind. Okay? Why are we feeling the same reality? Because our senses are the same. Okay? So this whole reality for us is a common reality. And in this common reality, we're feeling the same things. But we're not in the Creator's reality. Why? Because the Creator, back to the drawing board, is a desire to bestow. He wants to bestow. Well, because he wants to bestow and we want to receive, we are absolutely opposite. We're just not equal. So there's no way to feel him. So on the one hand, we have to be a desire to receive in order to get everything he wants to give us. But on the other hand, we're so opposite in this state that we're never going to get to feel him. And we're actually never going to get to feel pleasure simply because we just can't.
So between us and the Creator, is it that our desires are different?
Well, first of all, his desire is to fulfill us, and our desire is to fulfill ourselves. So we've got something in common.
Okay.
He wants to fulfill us, and we want to get fulfilled, okay? But there's the problem, all right? So how are we going to receive the fulfillment he wants to give us? That's the question, all right? So how can I? He wants to fulfill us. Great. We want to get fulfilled. Wonderful. So here's something in common. But how are we going to do that so that we can equalize with him? So that we don't feel like a man and his dog, but we feel like 2 equal partners in life. Okay? Because my dog wants to eat, and I do want to give him food. Okay? So I give him his bone, and he eats it, and he loves it. Okay? But I'm the guy, I'm the man, I'm the owner, and he is the dog. He's never going to be like me. He's always going to stay a dog, and he's always going to have to depend on me for that bone. So the Creator doesn't really want that to happen. Imagine how bad we would feel if the Creator was throwing a bone at us. Or, well, we're not going to eat a bone, but let's say a steak. Okay? You can appreciate that, Anthony.
I love steaks.
Okay? So imagine the Creator had a big steak and he cooked it on the barbie and he said, Anthony, you take it. And he just threw it at Anthony. So Anthony would say, well, wait a minute, dude, is that the way you serve a friend a meal? Even though he loves the steak, he's going to feel pretty offended, isn't he? He's going to say, well, that's not a nice way to eat together. So what we need to discover here is a relationship, is an attitude that we must build. So this is why we don't need to change the desire to receive. We just need to change how we're going to use this desire to receive. So in order to understand how we're going to do that, we first need to understand how we really perceive reality in our desire to receive, so that we can work on it in order to convert it into receiving pleasure in a way that doesn't diminish our, how do you say it, let's say, our self-worth, let's say. It doesn't make us, feel bad. All right? so that the relationship between the creator and the created being would be equal. All right?
Somewhat reciprocal in a way, right?
That's right, reciprocal, like there's such as respect between people, right? There's a certain attitude where you value a person and they value you. So there's an equivalence of value where you then have a good relationship. And if you didn't have that equivalence of value, you disregard that person. So the creator wants to create such a created being that between them there'll be this value. Not about what we get from the creator or what the creator gets from us, but about how we exist together with him without feeling any less than he is, so that we don't feel bad. Otherwise, we'd never feel good, would we? So we're going to get deeper into that. It might be a bit of a twist right now for all of us in the wisdom of Kabbalah, but let's see what else we can learn here. This is so because there is disparity of form to the point of oppositeness between itself and the emanator. This is because the emanator is complete bestowal, which is the creator is complete love and bestowal, is saying, without a shred of reception. And the creature is complete reception without a shred of bestowal, so we're completely opposite to the creator. Thus there is no greater oppositeness of form than that. It therefore allows that this oppositeness of form necessarily separates it from the emanator. And this is why we don't feel the creator. And the book of Zohar has a nice little allegory for this. They're like a worm that is born inside a radish. So that's us. Okay? It lives there and thinks that the world of the creator is as bitter, as dark and small as the radish it was born in. But as soon as it breaks the shell of the radish and peeps out, it claims in bewilderment, I thought the whole world was the size of the radish I was born in, and now I see a grand, beautiful and wondrous world before me. So this is actually our lives here, because we're going through a bunch of dramas in life. If you compare your happy moments to your non-happy moments, okay, the happy ones are much less than the non-happy ones. All right, it's meant to be like that. Otherwise, you'd never ask yourself why you're living. So, on purpose, life for us is like in this allegory, a bit of a bitter radish, unfortunately. But this unfortunate state can turn into a beautiful state if we focus ourselves on discovering what is beyond that radish. So this will actually allow us, this wisdom will allow us to see beyond what's happening in order to discover the cause of the things that are happening. And as we discover the reason behind things, then we'll be able to appreciate everything that happens. Even bad things that seem bad, they'll appear to be good in our eyes. So let's see what we have here. Now then, some of you may know that there are two ways to look at reality. Okay. Oops, let's make this a little thinner. So there is reality, and there's the observer. Now, the way we've been looking at reality comes all the way from Newton. Right? So, from Newton. Newton said, listen, I exist, okay? And before me, a reality exists. So, I exist. And there's the reality that exists. And if I should die, this reality continues to exist. That's what Newton said. And he's talking sense, because we see that people pass away and we're still living. And we can deduce from that, well, when I die, people will carry on living, right? That's what it looks like. And that's true. And we can't really argue with Newton, because in our eyes, that's how it is. And then what do we have? We had Einstein come on board. He said, listen, there's me and there's reality. And the reality, he said, is, you know what, it's constant. Okay? But I am changing. So there are laws of nature that cause me to change. And then quantum physics came along. He said, you know what? He said, reality changes and I change too. So the observer is changing and reality is changing as well. So this is where we're at right now. Okay? So what Newton said, we're actually still seeing things like Newton said, because we don't really understand what Einstein was talking about. Because he's saying reality is constant and I'm changing. Well, what's changing with me? I'm only growing older. My body's getting older. And I'm acquiring more wisdom or knowledge or experience in life. Well, if that's what you call change, that's a change. And then I end up dead. Right? And then Newton says, well, if you end up dead, we don't have to, because life still goes on. And that's what we say, don't we? Somebody passed away and then we say, well, what can you do? Life goes on. So here comes Kabbalah and says, well, wait a minute. Kabbalah says, listen. Let's say Kabbalah here. Kabbalah says, you change and there is no reality. There is no reality. So Kabbalists actually say, listen, there's only you. And outside, there's no reality. Which brings us back to the drawing board, because the Kabbalists said, well, look, you're a desire to receive, so the whole of reality is perceived in you. So, back to the beginning of the lesson, the Kabbalists said thousands of years ago, listen, dude, it's all in your head. Sounds like a psychiatrist talking to you, doesn't it? It's all in your head. Okay? Well, Kabbalah said that's how it is. In fact, we perceive reality according to the wisdom of Kabbalah. Okay. Let's do that. In our 5 senses, let's do this as well. Oh! How do I get back to that? Oh, there we go.
Thank God for the panic button.
Okay, so there we go. Let's delete this. Let's make this a little bit better. Okay. And there we go. So we have 5 senses. We see, smell, taste, touch, and hear. Okay. And according to what these 5 senses depict in my mind, I see the mountains, okay, there's stars all around, there are animals, there's rivers, okay, let's do this, there are animals roaming about, okay, there we go, okay, and there are humans running around, there are trees. So I see all of this reality, the still, the vegetative, the animate, and the speaking, which is the human level, all as a sensation inside my feelings. And we're already familiar with the concept of feelings, because our feelings only have 2 types. I either feel good or I feel bad. So from the things that I experience, I'm feeling all these things in me. I can't really separate my feelings and say, well, I'm not feeling these things. So if you think about it, since all our feelings and sensations from the environment are felt in me, it's very logical that the whole of reality is actually being lived by me in me. But you might say, hey Marty, we've got a question here. How come that I can see things, smell things, taste things, touch and hear things, and these things are the cause, this feedback from the outside world is giving me these sensations? Well, you'd be right, but we don't actually understand or know what's on the outside. Because on the outside, from the outside, we're just triggered. There's only a cause. So our whole life is just about only living the consequence. Now, when we first start studying the wisdom of Kabbalah, this is a bit too much to take in maybe. But we need to start getting our heads around it a little bit. Because if we carry on living with our five senses the way it is, and we look at everything as on the outside, then we stop actually relating to how we need to translate it into a language where we can understand the whole of reality. Because the whole of reality, what we seemingly see on the outside, is actually a conversation. And that conversation is between us. And therefore, through this conversation that's going on inside this reality as we feel it, we begin to decipher all the little details that exist. And you can say, in reality, all the little details that exist in reality, we begin to find out the cause and consequence. So we begin to slice up reality into little bits and pieces. We begin to feel and understand what's actually triggering these emotions, what's actually putting everything into motion. Okay, so the whole of reality becomes these segments which I begin to discover inside my feelings and sensations. And on the outside, what's influencing us? The Kabbalists say, well, except us, there's only the Creator. So there is, so there is me, okay, or that's you, and seemingly from my five senses, there is a Creator which wants to build a relationship with me. And the reason we don't feel the Creator is because of this polarity of form, because we're so opposite, just like I explained a while ago. We're so different in our forms that He's bestowing, He's seemingly giving us all the time through these five senses, and we're just sucking it in. So we're in this taking mode, He's in this giving mode, so we don't really have any reciprocity. In order to build that reciprocity, this relationship, just like between two people, we need to start tuning ourselves and start looking at reality as like the Creator has built this reality and He's influencing me so that I can go through certain changes. And through those changes, I can have equivalence of form with the Creator in the attribute of bestowal, and thus build this dialogue where I can actually participate in reality with the Creator. In order for us to do this, ladies and gentlemen, we're going to need what we discussed in the beginning of the lesson. On top of our five senses, we're going to need this dot in the heart. And we're going to have to focus on developing this little guy, because that is what's going to turn into a potential soul should we succeed. All right, so how are we going with everything?
Good.
Yeah?
No questions just yet?
Okay. So how can we do that? Well, let's redraw that. Okay. So I'm always talking about the dot in the heart. So let's draw a heart, shall we? Okay. There we go. And here is our dot in the heart. Now the dot in the heart is a very small sensation because he's just a question mark, isn't he? He's just, well, why are you living? What's the meaning of your life? And I'm sure all of you, when you were kids, asked your mum or dad, say, Dad or Mum, why are we living? What's the meaning of our life? I'm sure they told you some kind of story. I recall I was told one in the kitchen, all right? And I was a little kid then. I was about 5, 6 years old, but I specifically remember asking, who created us and why? Okay. Now this heart is the totality of our desires. So all our desires, the total of our desires. So a person's heart, when we talk about the heart in the wisdom of Kabbalah, we're talking about our desires. We're not talking about, obviously, a flesh, of meat or an organ inside our body. We're just talking about our desires. And we need to also start getting used to this idea that when the wisdom of Kabbalah starts talking about certain things that sound corporeal, we need to understand that they're not talking about corporeality, okay? Our body, this meat and bone, has nothing to do with spirituality. It's an animal, just like a monkey or a dog or a chicken. A chicken also walks on 2 legs. They, come out of the chicken's what do you call that? Chicken's, no?
Coops? Eggs?
No, not the eggs. The chicken's hut, all right? It's called
Yeah, we call them coops in Texas.
Coops, okay. Yeah. So the chickens, right, what do? They come out of the coops in the morning, all right? They get fed. They're running around the farm, okay? And then in the evening, they come back, all right? In the morning, miraculously, you might end up with a few eggs, all right? So this is our life as well. Just like chickens are roaming around on their 2 legs, we leave our houses, go to work, and earn our daily bread, come home, and then, at home, we're also engaging with things that chickens engage in, and we have children, don't we? And just like chickens have a life period, humans have a life period as well. So you might think it's a bit weird comparing us to chickens, but if you think about it, our animate life isn't much different than how an animal lives. So that raises us the question, well, why should we be so different? Because at the end of the day, we're not chickens. At the end of the day, we have an ability to do things that chickens can't, such as we can contemplate the future, we can plan ahead. So we have certain things that we can do that animals cannot do. So we need to think about, well, what should I be doing with this overcapacity that I have compared to an animal? And what should I be attaining so that I could stop living like an animal and start actually living at a higher level, which is beyond the sensations of this world, which is an addition to this world. Because right now, a chicken also lives in its senses. So do dogs, so do monkeys, bees, flies. Even though their sensory organs are different and they perceive reality differently, at the end of the day, the animate life is the same. And everybody dies. So we need to understand that separating factor, that little detail called the dot in the heart, which should differentiate us from our corporeal animate existence. And that is actually the leverage which allows us to build a soul. So at the moment, we don't have a soul. But if the dot in the heart has awakened in a person, and a person really wants to discover the purpose of life, that person has the potential to build a soul while living on this planet. Well, let's say while existing in this reality. Because as you can just imagine to yourselves for a moment, if all of reality is felt in me, the moment I die, this whole reality also dies. Because from my perspective, that's just how it is. So a person's goal in life should be to attain the soul and to live in it, which is beyond the borders of this corporeal existence. And that's why it's called an eternal life, as sometimes you might be reading about in Holy Scriptures. And that's something which is a level of existence we must attain right here in this reality. So we have our dot in the heart, and we have the total of our desires. And in this reality, what we need to do, while we've got our five senses, so our five senses are allowing us to perceive this reality, which is fine. Oops. We have to, on top of these five senses, utilize the dot in the heart, so that what we can actually perceive is, we can begin to perceive what is on the outside. Kind of like getting out of the box. Because we feel like sometimes we're living in a closed box, don't we? We feel that life is limiting us. And in order to feel what's on the outside, and on the outside there is only and only, the Kabbalists are saying in their text, is the Creator. So by growing this sensory organ, we can begin to actually use the whole of reality to build this relationship with the Creator. And that becomes our existence. Alright, so we can draw it in another way, which you're used to seeing, and that is as a desire to receive, right? So we're in this desire to receive. We perceive our reality in this desire to receive. Reality is in me, which is a desire to receive. But if on top of that I build a sensory organ called a soul, then with the soul I can begin to have a dialogue with the Creator. And as you can see, this drawing is a bit better because this sensory organ now, as you can see, is kind of above my desires. It's living in a different kind of dimension. That dot in the heart is no longer in the swamp of desires, but it's kind of like above all the desires. Okay? And the soul is sometimes called, in the wisdom of Kabbalah, a screen, or in Hebrew it's a masach. Okay? Same thing. It's an organ that can feel the Creator and thus build a relationship with the Creator, just like we have a relationship with our friends, family, and the whole of reality. We have this relation with people around us, with this reality, with our five senses, and we can now build a sixth sense to have a relationship with the Creator. And that's the whole idea, and this wisdom is only about building this relationship. Right, yeah. Have we got any questions there, Anthony?
No questions as of yet, I just checked.
Okay, great. So as you can see, this reality, the perception of reality, is a bit of a dense topic. It's something that we're going to have to start scratching on the surface, But as we study and as we move forward and go through these phases of study, we'll begin to start getting deeper into it. What happens as we study the wisdom of Kabbalah is that you begin to feel this inner change inside you. And this inner change is that sensation of changing, that you begin to perceive something a bit more than what you perceived before. It's a little hard to explain, but imagine like a kid, right? A little baby doesn't really feel the world like a grown-up because he's very limited, or she is very limited. They're just born. The only thing they can really feel when they're born is their mother, and they still feel like they're a part of their mother. But as they grow up, they begin to understand that, there's their home, and there's their country, there's the world, there's space, everything. They begin to perceive the whole world in a greater depth. And so as we study the wisdom of Kabbalah, we'll begin to enter this depth that we currently don't feel, but we will begin to feel layer by layer, just like I try to explain in this drawing here, that we kind of, it's like these layers of, onions. We begin to start feeling these layers, and we begin to get deeper and deeper and go into the next level of reality. We begin to perceive a higher level of consciousness and see the inner mechanism of how the whole of reality is working. And that's based on this law of equivalence of form, as we mentioned here. And this is the only way to actually perceive what is on the outside. And on the outside, as the Kabbalists say, there is only the Creator. Okay, so I hope this little introduction to the perception of reality has brought something additional, something new to how you're looking at life. And like I said, as we go deeper and deeper into the study, we'll be beginning to feel things that we normally missed out on in our sensations. We'll begin to get a deeper perspective of who we really are, what reality really is, how the laws of nature outside of us function, and how we can adjust ourselves to those laws and reach equivalence and feel the reason for everything that happens to us, and actually attain this complete wisdom of cause and consequence. And that will really make us independent, and that will really make us what we can really say a creature on itself, like a creature that is participating in the whole of reality at a very conscious level. And that's actually called rising to the level of the Creator. And that's the purpose of creation for all of us. So let's read a little bit more before we end our session for today. And then if you feel that you need to, it's always good to go back and listen to the lesson again. Even though we see everything as actually being in front of us, every reasonable person knows for certain that all that we see is only within our own brains. So when we're talking about reasonable people, obviously we're talking about people who are a little educated and who understand these topics. That's reasonable. So are the souls. Although they see all the images in the giver, they still have no doubt that all these are only in their own interior and not at all in the giver. So even as we attain levels of spirituality, as you will recall in our previous lesson, we said that we were all created in perfection in the first place. Here, in our initial existence, we were all created in perfection. And then what happened is we lost that perception. The reason for that is so that we could attain that perception on our own. And let's do it like this. And from the level of this existence here, with our dot in the heart, we can actually study the wisdom of Kabbalah, develop ourselves, and then have the opportunity to actually go back to this level of perfection with our own effort, and that's called complete attainment. Because in our perception here, we don't have any idea of what this level is. This is just a question mark. But this reshimo, this initial state of our soul, is called an impression. It's a spiritual impression. In the wisdom of Kabbalah, it's called a reshimo. Spiritual impression, reshimo. Okay? And this reshimo comes to us from here because this is our place here. And when it awakens, it instinctively wants to go back there. It says, listen, take me back up here, because this world here, the way we're living, is just not fun anymore. So in order to take us back to that perfection, we need to go through a conscious state of development. And that is called the process of development, where we become human. Where we become human means something that is participating in reality like the Creator. And that's what it means to go rise to His level. That's what it means to get to heaven, by the way, in case you're still in your religion, you have faith in all kinds of religions. And a lot of people have religions. We're also coming from, in our backgrounds, we have our cultural heritage where we have religious beliefs. But in the holy concept of things, when they're talking about heaven, they're actually talking about reaching this perfection. And this is something that we must do ourselves. We need to build that. And that perfection is that high level of consciousness. It's not like a playground for kids, like sometimes it's described, where you get whatever you want. It's something you build. It's a level which you build. Just like in our life, we build a life for ourselves. So in the Creator's reality, we build a life for ourselves there as spiritual beings. So this wisdom should take us up through the steps of the ladder until we get to the purpose of life, which is to reach equivalence of form 100% with the Creator.
We've got a question that just came in. It says here, how do I get to perceive the Creator? And also it says, I'll start over. This question says, how do I get to perceive the Creator? How do I get above my desires? And what must I do?
Well, that's a really good question. So you're straight to the point. And who's that?
That came from Dillis from South Africa.
Dillis from South Africa is asking. Okay, so how do I get to perceive the Creator? Well, in order to perceive the Creator, on top of our five senses, like I said, actually, let's just go back, or let's go forward. Okay, here we are. One more. There we go. Now, we need to work on, actually, this dot in the heart here. Okay, Shmuel, if you can take me to the drawing board. Thank you. We need to work on this dot in the heart. So what we have to do, because we're a desire to receive, this dot in the heart is also a desire, right? The Creator created, the only thing the Creator created is a desire to receive pleasure, which is fine. So this is also a desire. But this is a desire to get to perfection, to get to that high level of consciousness, to reconcile our existence. That's what this desire is for. And because it's also a desire, what we have to do is, from this little dot, we have to build a huge desire for spirituality. So the study should actually build in us a desire for spirituality instead of wandering off to all kinds of things that doesn't really give us any fulfillment. So the wisdom of Kabbalah is for a person to invest in building a desire in order to find the Creator. Now, why is this so important? Why should I build a desire for this? Well, the Creator, being the genius He is, He created us as a desire to receive, and He wants to fulfill it. But He doesn't want to fulfill it with transient pleasures. He doesn't want to fulfill it with pleasures that just vaporize and disappear, because there's no point. He wants to give us something that sticks, something that never ends, a pleasure that never saturates, never disappears. Somewhere, a state where we can feel that perfection, ongoing pleasure continuously. So that's the pleasure He wants to give us. So what we need to do is to build a desire that matches the pleasure He wants to give us, instead of the pleasures that we run after. And the second part of that question was?
Second part is, and what must I do?
What we must do is we need to study the wisdom of Kabbalah so we can actually build a desire. Build a desire for spirituality. And this can be done by studying it. Spirituality. Just like everything in life. In life, we study how to be a doctor and we become a doctor. Right? We attain what we want. We want to be a lawyer, we study. An accountant, we want to study. A mechanic, a computer programmer, whatever. A dancer, a musician, an artist, whatever. You work at it. And by working at something in this life, you build something. You build a life for yourself. Well, the same thing is for the soul. If you're constantly working on developing the soul with the wisdom of Kabbalah, this is why it's such a practical wisdom, because we're constantly doing things to build something, like an artist. So the study, what happens is the study builds inside of us a desire to become a conscious person, a spiritual person that can perceive the reasons, the causes for everything that happens, rather than just living our lives blindly. Now, when you have such a desire, then, and the Creator wanting to fulfill that specific desire, His actions start to work on you. And then you start to get drops of feelings here and there that you didn't feel before. So it's a process which we need to go through. It's called the studying of the wisdom of Kabbalah. Anything else there?
That was the last question.
All right, great. Well, that's straight to the point. So studying with us, studying an ongoing development of ourselves in terms of becoming more and more open to perceiving this reality will develop us just like children develop in this world. So I hope this lesson has contributed somewhat or something additional to what you might have known, and I hope it was of an interest to you. Our next lesson is also going to be interesting because we're going to talk about how to build this thing on top of our desires, which we were talking about. If I can just find it. Can I find it? Okay, so yes, I can find it. I think it was at the end. One more. Yes, there we go. So this soul, we're going to talk about how to build one in our next lesson. And I'm sure that will answer Dillis's question in a bit more detail. And if you're wondering about your soul and you're a little shocked about hearing how you don't have one, okay, this will be the lesson to be anticipating. In the meantime, have a great evening, have a great week already, and a great weekend until we meet next time. All the best.
Bye-bye.